Hello, everybody, and welcome to this live call. Okay, I am genuinely so excited to dive into this topic. This is one of my favorite talks. If you were at the summit last year, you might remember this, but talking about goal writing is one of this sounds crazy, but it's one of my favorite things to do nowadays, even though for the longest time I absolutely dreaded goal writing. So before we get into the talk, I just want to answer a couple of the questions that I see coming up in the chat, just so everybody feels good about the rest of our time together. I see a couple people talking about Alex Zakos, her presentation having some sound glitch. We are looking into it. We are reaching out to Alex and we will get that fixed. If it's not fixed soon, then we will extend access for free ticket holders. So that way you get an entire 24 hours with it. Because I know everybody wants to see that presentation. So we're working on it. If at any point you are having a hard time finding your hub, that is where everything is going to live throughout the duration of the summit. If you're a free ticket holder, your hub is located at childled.org/free hub. Christy is going to put that in the chat for us as well. And if you are on the All Access Pass, then you can find your hub at childledautismsummit.com. And you'll know that that's the All Access Pass because it will say it in the top left corner, but also you'll have to log in. So if you're having any issues with any of your hubs or any tech issues, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at summit@childled.org. But remember, it's just Christy and I, so we will get through any tech hiccups as soon as humanly possible because we are humans. So let's get into it because I don't want to waste any more time. I know you're here to talk about goal writing, so let's get right on into it. Okay, so I want you to put in the chat right now what best describes where you are right now. Put a 1 if you want to spend less time writing goals. Put a 2 if you need help figuring out what goals even make sense for autistic students that you're supporting. Put a 3 if you're like, I just want to stop recreating the dang wheel every time I go to write a new IEP or a report. And put a 4 if it is all of the above. Now, while you're doing that, I also want to let Christy know in the background, Christy's here backstage with me, that we are getting comments about Joanne Cazot's presentation. So if you could go and make sure that one is working, we'll get that one addressed too. I saw that in the comments. So thank you. Okay, so I'm seeing all different scores come in, a lot of 4s, which I would have to relate to. I would have to agree with, I should say. I was always a 4 throughout this career of mine. So you're in the right place no matter where you ended up scoring. And I am going to start us off with a story. So if you know me, you know I love a good story. And this one really sums up the crux of why I talk about rubric goals this point in my career. About 9 years ago, I was working in a school for autistic students, and it was just one of those weeks. Like, I think you can all relate, but it just felt like every IEP was due, every progress report was due, every meeting that could possibly be scheduled was on my calendar, and nobody was absent. It's like it was just everything happening at once, and I felt like I was drowning with everything going on. And there was this one particular IEP that was really hanging over my head. And I was really worried about it. And it wasn't because I didn't know how to support the child. I actually felt really confident in supporting this child, but it was because I could not figure out a way to write a goal that would actually capture what we were working on in our sessions. And that was really frustrating me. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to stay late and I'm going to lock in and I'm going to write this goal if it's the last thing that I do. And so that's what I ended up doing. My coworkers were getting ready to leave. It was 3:00. The bell rang. Everybody is talking about what they're going to have for dinner or their kids' soccer games or what they're watching on TV. Meanwhile, I'm just at my computer thinking, I'm going to be here all night. This is terrible. And I sat there on Google because I also like to point out that this was well before any of the tools that we have today. So really all I could do was go on Google and hope to God somebody out there had a good goal for me. I would Google things like best goals for autistic students or goal banks, autism. And even though I was probably 10 pages deep on Google, nothing was actually capturing what I wanted for this particular child. At that point, I remember looking up from my desk and realizing it was actually dark outside. That's how long I had been sitting there. And I can remember this moment of frustration, just frustration, feeling like, why am I so bad at this? Why are goals so hard? That was the story that I kept telling myself, that I was just really bad at writing goals. Now, all of a sudden, I heard this jingling in the hallway and the heavy wheels of a big trash can rolling down. So I knew the maintenance man was on his way into my office to do his nightly cleaning. And as he opened the door to the office, I just leaned over from my desk and said, "Hi." When I tell you that man jumped, I've never seen somebody jump as big as this man did. He jumped out of his skin. I scared the crap out of him. I feel like I saw his soul leave his body. He was obviously not expecting anybody to be in the school when it was dark outside. And he turned around and said to me, "What in the world are you still doing here?" In that moment, I had to laugh because it was such a simple question, but it was also such a piercing one for me, because why was I still there, literally working for free for hours after I should have been home? I knew I was a good speech therapist. I knew how to support my autistic students, but goal writing was the bane of my existence. And it was so frustrating. Why couldn't I write a good goal that would actually capture my therapy with these students? At the time, I just kept telling myself things like, if you try harder, if you find the right goal bank, if you just work on this longer, you'll figure it out. But that didn't really happen. This was also sort of a turning point for me because it forced me to think about why this process was so painful and so tedious. And from that moment on, I decided to figure out a better way. And I developed a new system, which is the exact framework that we're going to talk about today. And it's a system where we can write rubric goals to really capture what we're doing in our therapy and in our classrooms with our autistic students, particularly while supporting communication. Now, these goals that we write today, that we look through today, are going to be from a speech therapist's frame of reference, but I have many members inside the collective and people that I've worked with over the past few years who have been able to adapt this same approach to all different areas of supporting autistic kids, all different disciplines and types of therapy. So if you're here and you're not a speech therapist or a teacher and you're not thinking about communication goals, then I want you to take from this presentation the framework, and I believe that you can apply it no matter what discipline you're in and what you're supporting your autistic students with. Now, before we get into anything else, I just want to let you all know, if you've ever had that thought that you're a bad goal writer, you're not. We just were not given the right tools. And the system has not provided us with the right supports for being able to write goals for autistic students. So you're not bad at writing goals. And I hope that this conversation today will shift that perspective for you and reframe what's actually going on and give you more confidence with your goal writing. Now, I feel like I probably don't have to introduce myself, but in case anybody is brand new here, I'm Nicole Casey. I am the host of this summit, and I go by the Child-Led SLP. I hated goal writing for the longest time. And then I opened my own private practice, and I had other professionals working with me, and I had to support them through goal writing. And I said, well, you just write a rubric goal. And they looked at me like I had 10 heads. So I realized that this wasn't something everybody knew how to do. And this really set me on a journey to putting the exact way that I write my goals into framework format so that I could help more people with this particular approach. So welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. And here's what we're going to cover. In part one, we're going to talk about why traditional goal writing does not work for so many of our autistic students. Then we'll get into the aligned rubric framework, what it is and how to use it. And in part 3, we'll go through a live demo, which is my favorite part, where we are going to actually build a rubric goal together for a child. And you'll see just how easy this process is. Like, painfully simple is really what it comes down to. So, why does this matter? Before we even talk about the actual goals, we need to understand why goals are so important. Something that I think about all the time is the fact that the goals that we write end up trickling down to everything else that we do with the autistic kids that we support. The goals that we write end up becoming the data that we collect. And the data that we collect ends up going into our progress reports and determining whether a child's making progress or not, right? The progress that we capture or don't capture then gets reported in the child's IEP or their report. And in those present levels that we write, when we're describing what the child's doing or not doing, we're taking everything that we have captured from that original goal. And the biggest thing for me about all of this is that what we collect in our sessions in terms of data, what we write in our reports, and what we end up putting into our paperwork ends up becoming what we talk about in the meeting. We go into our meetings with our teams, with families, and we talk about the progress that we have been able to document. And from talking about this in our meetings, this ultimately becomes what we believe about that child. And so it's so important that we get our goals right because it affects every other part of that child's support. When we think about why any of this is important, I think about it from my perspective of having only worked with autistic kids my entire career exclusively. For the entire 12 plus years I've been a speech therapist, I've only worked really with autistic kids. And in my experience, I think about the different labels that kids get, the different perspectives that adults have on kids, and where those labels and perspectives came from. The adult didn't just come up with it, right? A lot of times, what we see is a child's abilities or who they are gets described by an adult and passed down to the next adult. And then you've got a kid in middle school who everybody has one view of. And so my whole reason for wanting to talk about goals and really wanting to improve them is because they can really make or break the trajectory of that child's academic life. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Now, when I think of some of the kids that I have worked with over the years, there was a particular child on my caseload who had a very compliance-based goal on her IEP, and it seemed like she had that same goal year after year with like a slight tweak to it. And I remember looking at the goal and thinking, this doesn't even sound like this child. Like, I see different things from her in these sessions, and this is not capturing her capacity and it's not capturing her strengths at all. And when we write narrow, really deficits based goals, we train our minds to look for deficits. We train teams to notice these things. But when we write rubrics that capture authentic growth, we train our minds to start looking for the strengths, and we help the other adults around us to do the same. I am so passionate about this topic, if you can't tell, and I can't wait to actually just show you how to put this into practice. But before we do that, let's talk about the 4 main challenges of traditional goal writing for autistic kids. Challenge number 1 is that goals written in a traditional sense, which we'll talk a little bit about later, what that actually means, they measure performance, not the process. So if you think about what a traditional goal might look like for an autistic child, a lot of times what we end up writing is child will do X skill with 80% accuracy. And when we write our goals this way, what we're measuring is whether the child did the thing or didn't do the thing, and whether they did it correctly or incorrectly. And our data ends up measuring the child's performance. It doesn't really give us insight into the process, and it really doesn't help us to notice those smaller micro steps toward achieving the goal. We don't get to see all the steps along the way that are so important when it comes to supporting our autistic kids' communication. Because one thing about child led neuroaffirming therapy is that we don't have huge gains every single session, right? Sometimes it feels like we're plateaued or nothing's really happening. But when we reframe what we're looking for and what we capture as progress, we start to notice the little baby steps along the way. And that's good for all of us. That's good for the child, for their team to be able to see all of these micro moments of progress. It's also good for us to be able to know that we're on the right track. The second challenge with traditional goal writing is that these goals define one correct response. We write that a child will do something in 8 out of 10 opportunities. And when we write a goal like this, we have decided that one particular behavior or action or skill is the correct response, is the goal. And then we spend our time with that child trying to get them to do that thing. And if they don't do it, we mark it as an X or a minus sign on our data sheet. I like to use this example because I think that it is really concrete. But let's say I write a goal for a child that they will request their preferred objects with 80% accuracy. They come in for therapy and I know they love bubbles. So I get out the bubbles and I place them in front of the child. The child is sitting across from me, and I'm assuming because she loves bubbles that she's going to request them, and I'm going to be able to put a little plus sign on my data sheet. But imagine the child pushes the bubbles away or turns away from me or otherwise doesn't engage with those bubbles. Well, if my goal was written that they will request their preferred objects, then this would probably end up earning them a minus sign on the data sheet because they didn't request the bubbles and they love bubbles. But what did it miss? When we write goals like this, we end up missing the actual communication that's happening because that child did communicate, right? She protested, she rejected, she told me basically no by pushing it away. And so when we write really narrow goals, we end up collecting data, but it doesn't capture the big picture. The third challenge with traditional goal writing is that it centers the adult's agenda. And this is one that I think comes up all the time when it comes to trying to move out of the traditional adult-directed therapy style into child-led. When we write goals with accuracy percentages or in 8 out of 10 opportunities in some cases, we go in thinking, okay, this is what the child has to do today. I need to get data, so I need to make sure that these things happen in the session. And that really gets in the way of being child-led. When we go in thinking there's this one thing that I need the child to do today, we end up doing whatever's in our power to make that happen. And that can really stop us and be a barrier to our child-led approach, which leads me to challenge 4. These traditional goals make it really difficult to be child-led. Because when we are tied to our data and our data is tied to whether the child performed or didn't perform a skill, then we really can't let the child lead because we have to collect data. We are tied to our goals. So when we write our goals, we are really starting to think about, will this goal allow me to be the child-led professional that I want to be? That is a question that I ask myself when I'm writing goals. And this is really the reason and the way that I was able to develop the framework that we're going to learn today. Now, rubric-based goals offer an alternative to these traditional goals. And before we look at the framework, I just want to go over what a rubric is in this particular context. So in this context, a rubric is a scoring guide that describes what a child's progress looks like from emerging, from the skill is brand new or they're not even really doing it yet, all the way through independence or autonomy, whatever that looks like for the child for a particular skill. Now, I know I've been talking for a few minutes and I want to come back to the chat just to check in with everybody. Let me know in the chat, put a 1 if you've written rubrics before, if you're a big fan of rubrics and you love them. So I'm curious if any of you have already written rubric-based goals. So put a 1 if you have and you love them. Put a 2 if you've tried them, but you're not fully confident yet. And put a 3 if you've never used or written a rubric-based goal. So I'm going to come into the chat and check it out. Okay, I'm seeing 2s. I do see a couple 3s as well. All right. 2s and 3s. Did I see any 1s? Okay, so I see at least 1 or 2 1s here too, which is great. Okay. So no matter where you are, you're going to walk away feeling confident. I can promise you that. So let's go on and talk about how rubrics actually support communication development. When we write rubric goals, they prioritize the process, not just the outcome. The reason that this is so important is because the rubrics that we write will end up allowing us to actually see the movement that a child makes from their starting point, their baseline, all the way through where they end up. And it lets us not only just see that progress on a day by day, week by week, month by month basis, but also it helps us to describe that growth. And that growth is not always huge and flashy, right? Like when I think about childhood therapy with autistic kids, it's not always this big fireworks of progress. Some sessions feel like nothing is happening. But when we use rubric goals, even those sessions that might feel like nothing's happening, give us really important insight into that child's trajectory with their communication. Rubrics also let us templatize. Is that a word, templatize? They become a template for us that we can reuse so we're never starting from scratch. Now, this may be my favorite part of rubrics, aside from the fact that they help me really understand my kids so much better. Just as a clinician, as a busy professional, I can't think of anything worse than sitting down to write a goal and looking at a blank screen and literally racking my brain trying to figure out what the heck am I going to work on with this kid, right? Our autistic students don't always follow the developmental goal trajectory that we've been taught, right? Like when we're thinking about what goals to write, oftentimes, at least for me, it feels like there's this whole big pile of things we could work on, and being able to prioritize which skills we'll target and know that I'm choosing correctly feels really difficult because we don't have a lot of great standardized tests, if any, for our autistic students. We don't have a ton of assessment tools that are neuroaffirming out there to help us really identify and pinpoint where we need to be supporting our students. So a lot of times sitting down to write a goal for an autistic child is very much looking at a blank screen or just going with a goal that, kind of covers what you're trying to do. And so when you learn the rubric framework, you'll have a template that you'll start just swapping in and out for your kids. You'll never start from scratch again. So what is this framework that I keep talking about? The aligned rubric framework is my system for writing rubrics. Now, an aligned rubric is a tool that allows us to describe and measure progress in a flexible and nuanced way. Because instead of just collecting pluses and minuses for correct or incorrect, whether a child did or didn't do whatever it is that we want them to do, rubrics capture the range of how they're actually communicating and showing up. Now, right now, I just want to tell you a little bit about rubrics, but when we get into our demo, which is always my favorite part, I told you, you'll actually start to see this in action and it will start to click and make a lot more sense. Aligned rubrics, at the end of the day, are my favorite thing because they honor our kids. They honor their growth no matter how big or small, and they help us to see that growth not only just in our isolated sessions, but across the board. And so let's talk about how to actually put the framework into action. The framework has 3 simple steps, and I mean simple. Step 1 is identifying the child's areas of need. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? So in step 1, we figure out, what am I wanting to support this child with? What do they actually need? Step two, much like every other goal that we've ever written, we have to write the overarching long-term goal for that child. And step three, we build the rubric. So no big deal, just 3 quick steps. Let's go a little bit deeper though, because it's more than that. In step one, we are identifying the child's areas of need. And like I said at the beginning of this conversation, we are focusing on communication on this call. But if you're an OT or a music therapist, or you support an autistic child in a different area, these framework ideas or steps can be applied. You'll just have to think about what that might look like with the areas that you are supporting. But if I think about what step one means for developing a communication rubric, I think first of all, the ultimate goal for our autistic students is that they can communicate whenever they want, wherever they want, to whomever they want, and however they want, right? About whatever they want to talk about. So that's going to be on my mind when I'm identifying the areas of need to support them with. That leads me to start thinking, what communication functions are most important for this child? And an aligned rubric tracks 3 to 5 specific skill areas from those relevant communication functions. So every rubric will track how the child is progressing with a few different communication functions. Now, choosing communication functions to support is so important because we need to not only just think about what's important for the child right now, but also what is supportive for them in the big picture. And so I like to start with some of these early developing communication functions that you see here on this wheel, but these are not the entire picture. There are so many different targets that we can support an autistic child with. And we're going to talk specifically about those functions when we get into our live demo in just a minute. And we'll actually start to think through how to choose the right communication function. So step two, we are writing the overarching goal. So this is the template that I tend to write my goals with. When provided with, and then I include whatever support makes this child needs in order to do the thing. And a lot of times I will say, when provided with unrestricted access to sensory supports, the child will, and then I will list whatever communication function or functions I'm supporting. Now, this is the biggest difference. Instead of saying with 80% accuracy, I will write to achieve X out of X. So whatever score that they will achieve on their rubric, on their communication rubric, measured however frequently for whatever duration. I typically will write this measured monthly for 3 months or so, depending on what I'm required to write. But I used to write this measured weekly, and I realized that every week, not all of the skills were happening in my sessions, and it wasn't giving me a full comprehensive picture of the child's progress. So I still collect data with my rubrics every session, every week, or however often I see that child, but I consolidate it and I give them a rubric score monthly, because then I can look back on all of our sessions and see what did they do throughout those weeks and which of the communication functions did we target most. And it gives me just a deeper picture of the actual progress that's happening. Now, step 3, we build the rubric. And the first thing that we do when we write a rubric is we determine the criteria. When we get into the rubric that we're going to build for our student Charlie in just a few minutes, we will talk a little bit more about what criteria we might be using to score our rubrics. But after we identify the criteria, we then have to define the scores I use from 1 to 4. So a score of 1 for a particular skill will mean that the child is newly emerging with that skill. And a 4 might mean that they're independent or autonomous. We'll get into this in just a minute. But you're going to define a rating scale from 1 to 4 for each of those skills. And the last thing that we do before anything else is we find a baseline score for the child, because we need to know where are they starting from so that way we can actually measure progress. And that is not a guess or an estimate. We can actually look back and say, at the beginning, here's where they scored. And now here's where we are. So a baseline score is really, really important for this. Okay, so let's switch gears for a second and let's get into our case study. This is Charlie. Charlie is 6 years old. She's autistic and she is a multimodal communicator. So here's how Charlie tends to communicate. Charlie uses hand leading and actions. So she might grab your hand and guide it to something that she wants. And she uses her actions and gestures most of the time to communicate. She also has an AAC device, and she uses this predominantly to request really highly preferred objects, especially if they are in the environment and she can see them. Charlie uses vocalizations to express her feelings at times, and she will occasionally use single words with her speech to label things that she really wants. So these are the 4 different kind of areas of how Charlie communicates. Now, I just want to remind everybody that there is a workbook that has been linked in the chat. Christy's going to put that link in the chat again if she hasn't. That way you can follow along with this part with the workbook, because it's really helpful to be able to see it in front of you as we are going through this demo. But grab that workbook. This is going to be everything that you need to remember and know from this workshop. Okay, so here's Charlie's current goal. Charlie's current goal is Charlie will communicate wants and needs with 80% accuracy. I'm just going to read it one more time. Charlie will communicate wants and needs with 80% accuracy. Now, let's just talk about this goal for a second, shall we? I want you to put in the chat, let me know, have you ever seen a goal like this? And if you're brave enough and willing to be vulnerable and admit, have you ever written this goal yourself or one similar to it? I have written this goal more times than I would like to admit. And the reason that I would end up writing a goal like this is because I would be trying so hard to find a better goal and failing, or at least feeling like I was failing in identifying that unicorn of a goal. So I would always fall back on this request wants and needs with 80% accuracy because it felt like it was all encompassing. It would catch everything. It would allow me to be child-led because it doesn't really say anything, does it? It's very vague and generic. So I'm going to come into the chat for a second and just see if we've got any brave people sharing whether they've written this goal. Okay, I see. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, relatable. All right. Yeah, this is a goal. I'm telling you, this is probably the goal I've written most in my entire career. Hate to say it, but it definitely is. So you're not alone. If you write this goal, you're not doing anything wrong. This is genuinely, for a lot of us, the best way to capture our child-led approach. But hopefully by the end of today's call, you'll have a different way to go about this that will feel a lot more aligned and will actually help you capture real progress and make data so much easier. Okay, but let's talk about specifically what is the problem with a goal like this. I think there are 3 specific areas that make this goal less than ideal. The first thing is that we don't actually know what Charlie wants or needs. Like, we are not Charlie. And so we might have a good guess about what a child wants or needs, but we're not Charlie. And I might know, oh, Charlie likes bubbles. So I'm going to present the bubbles and she should want those bubbles, right? Because she likes bubbles. But we don't actually know. Maybe she's bored of bubbles. Maybe she doesn't like bubbles anymore. Maybe she just doesn't feel like blowing bubbles today. Maybe she doesn't feel well. We don't actually know unless we are in the child's body. We don't know what they want or need. Our best guess can be really educated. It can be a good hypothesis, but at the end of the day, we don't know unless we are that child. So when we decide what's accurate or inaccurate, we're not always correct, and our data may not be accurate. Now, we also can't determine, kind of in that same vein, whether she's accurate or not, unless we are in her body and her brain, which we're not. I think of this example and I'll share it with you because I think it really provides some clarity to how this might show up in our sessions. Early on in my career, I was working with an autistic child, and my supervisor was really into PECS. So if you're not familiar, PECS is Picture Exchange Communication System. And I am not trained in PECS. I don't even remember the different levels. So if you are, don't quote me on this. But at one point in the PECS protocol, you're to offer a child two things, and one object is the thing that they like, right? It's the thing that they love. It's what they should request. And then you're supposed to offer them something that is completely irrelevant and kind of not preferred. It doesn't have to necessarily be unpreferred or aversive, but it's just something that they would have no use for. It's useless. So in this particular session, we offered the child, I forget what it was, like a car. He really liked cars. Maybe it was a toy car and a tissue. And he picked the tissue and he handed over the picture of a tissue. And my supervisor said, he can't discriminate between pictures. This is the issue. In her mind, because he's requesting the tissue, he's wrong, because he should be requesting the car because he likes cars. And so she's marking that down as an X, inaccurate, because he didn't ask for the right thing according to her and what she believed was accurate. Meanwhile, this kid is having the time of his life with that tissue. He is dropping it in front of his eyes. He's watching it fall. He's waving it in front of his face. He is having a grand old time with that tissue. And I'm thinking, doesn't look like he doesn't want that tissue. I think he actually probably was accurate in asking for the tissue. And back then I didn't have the confidence or the experience to really put words to this. And I remember just thinking in that moment, I don't know, this doesn't make sense to me, but I guess if that's what we're supposed to do. And now all these years later, I think he wanted that tissue. And so we don't actually know what our kids want. And we need to be better communication partners and present, attuned listeners, and really be able to understand how our kids are showing up if we want to actually understand their communication. Now, this goal also does not tell us anything about how to support progress, how to know which particular aspects of requesting wants and needs she's already doing well, which she's not. It's just too general, and it's not specific enough for us to really put into practice. And it would make it really hard for anybody else to pick that goal up and know exactly what we were working on. It's just too generic. So what can we do instead of a goal like this? We're going to rewrite Charlie's goal using the aligned rubric framework. So as I said, step one is to identify areas of need. Now, because this is just a workshop and we don't have all the time in the world, I have gone through and chosen the relevant areas that we can support Charlie with. And I'll show you how I came to those decisions. But I want you to know that inside the full aligned rubric framework, which lives inside my Child-Led Collective membership, there are over 20 pages of different communication functions and skills. Each function is broken down into several different smaller skills. And these are the skills that you can choose to incorporate in your rubrics. But in this workshop, just for the sake of time and clarity, we're going to look at a few specific functions. But I just want you to know that this is way more comprehensive than what we're going to get through today. So let's identify Charlie's specific areas of need. Whenever I sit down to think about what a child needs from a goal, I think about how they're showing up. So think about Charlie. She's occasionally guiding adults to things in the immediate environment. She's waiting for adults to notice when she needs help. So one of the things about Charlie that we know is that she doesn't necessarily ask for help or initiate in those moments. And this is evidenced by the fact that we saw her at snack one day. It was a busy hustle and bustle of a snack, and she had her snack in front of her, but she couldn't get it open. And rather than asking for somebody to help her open it, she just kind of sat there. And so snack came and went and she didn't eat. Now, for a present communication partner who is distracted and busy just trying to get everything out, you might go to her and go, "Oh my gosh, Charlie, I'm so sorry I didn't open this for you." But we also run the risk of an adult thinking, "I guess she's not hungry. She didn't open her snack and eat it," you know? And that might not be true. And maybe she is hungry. So Charlie sits and waits for adults to notice and anticipate her needs. And similarly, she's not telling people what she wants them to do. For example, if I blow the bubbles, she might like that, but she's not yet telling me, do that again or blow the bubbles. When Charlie doesn't like something, she pushes it away or turns her body. And this is a great way to communicate for her. It's reliable. But the difficulty with this is that it's not always understood by her peers. And frankly, it's not always accepted as valid by the adults around her, which is another problem. But a lot of times when she pushes things away or she turns her body, her peers don't necessarily realize that that's her way of saying stop it or no or go away. So they just continue to try to play with her or get the toy that she has. And that causes a lot of frustration and dysregulation. Speaking of dysregulation, Charlie is dysregulated by loud sounds and spaces, but she's not yet able to advocate for those sensory needs. She doesn't have a reliable way to do that. So that is the first step in identifying Charlie's areas of need. So what we'll do next is we'll take these things that we have laid out about Charlie and we'll start thinking, what functions of communication should we support Charlie with based on what we're seeing from her? Now, like I said, in the interest of time, I have taken the liberty of coming up with these myself, but just to see if we're all on the same page, I would love for you in the chat to start putting some communication functions that, based on how I just described Charlie, you think would be good starting points. So what communication functions do you think we might start with Charlie? And I'm going to give you just a few seconds to share some of your ideas. What communication functions do you think we might? So I'm seeing protest, ask for help, initiating, directing actions, self-advocacy, requesting. Awesome. We are on the same page. Okay. So the 4 specific communication functions that I would start with this child would be requesting, protesting, self-advocacy, and directing actions. So you guys got all 4 of them. Now, when I think about these particular communication functions in this first column, I realize that these are still pretty big, right? They're not broken down as far as I would like them to be. And so when I start sharing my screen and we start building this rubric together, we'll actually look at these communication functions and some of the smaller skills that fall underneath of them to be able to fill Charlie's rubric with really specific measurable skills that don't just say, oh, Charlie will request. We're going to break that down into specific forms of requesting. And so when we start to look at the table that I choose these skills from, it'll all start to become even clearer. All right, so step 2, write Charlie's goal. This is the format, like I said, I use pretty much exclusively, but I will swap in and out the different supports that the child might need. So it might sound like this. When provided with unrestricted access to sensory supports, Charlie will achieve a 16 out of 20 on her communication rubric measured monthly for 3 consecutive months. And 16 out of 20 is just where we ended up for this particular rubric that we'll look at in a minute. But this score will be whatever you've determined is the goal for that child. Okay, step 3, build the rubric. So we've got to determine the criteria. We have to define those scores and find a baseline. There are 4 main types of criteria that I typically will use when writing a rubric. There is level of support needed, frequency of the skill. Criteria 3 is what I call an individualized hierarchy. So this is one where I am going to describe exactly what that skill looks like for that particular child on a continuum from where they are now to where they will be. And so it's a kind of a combination of level of support, frequency, generalization. The individualized hierarchy is one that I find is easiest to use when you know the child really, really well, when you've been with them for a while, when you really have a good sense of how they communicate. I might write an individualized hierarchy, but typically that is a harder way to write the rubric. And then criteria 4 is generalization. So can they do this skill elsewhere outside of our sessions? And we'll talk about that a little bit. But for today, we're going to keep it really simple and we're going to go with level of support needed. This is typically where I start with my rubrics. And honestly, this is probably what 80% of my rubrics are measured by, because it's easy to collect data on and it's measurable and clear. And it's just knowing that each number on the table as it increases means they needed a little bit less adult support. All right, so let's do the rest together. This is the time where I'm going to share my screen and we're going to build Charlie's rubric together because I want you to see how easy it is. Now, I wrote on here, before I do, I want to also tell you that inside the Child-Led Collective, we have this tool that I developed called the Rubric Generator. And the Rubric Generator will ask you a few questions and help you to write your rubric goal in minutes. So we're going to take a look at that as well. All right, so I'm going to pause my screen share for just a second, and I'm going to pull up my next screen. I'm also going to turn off my text notifications because I'm sorry if they were coming up on the screen talking about my my plans. But anyway, I'm going to try to figure out how to turn those off as well. And we're going to move forward. Now, let me know before we get started on this. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Are you excited about this? Is it starting to make sense? Okay. Wendy said they weren't. Okay. Phew. Because there was a whole baby shower group chat happening on my screen. So thank you. I'm glad that that wasn't on your screen. Okay. So let's go and share our next screen here. Okay, got it. Let's get it up on the screen. All right, look at me. I'm a tech goddess. Usually this is where I start panicking because I can't figure out how to share my screens and what screens I'm sharing. All right, we're good though. Look at me. Okay, now let's get into the actual process of, thank you, Karen. Karen says, woo. I can always count on you, Karen, to cheer me on. All right, so just a quick reminder of our steps. Number 1, we're choosing our skill areas. Number 2, we're going to write the overarching goal. Number 3, we're going to define our ratings and scores. Number 4, we're going to get a baseline. And number 5, we're good. We're ready to go. So quick about Charlie, just to refresh our memories. She's occasionally guiding adults to things in the immediate environment. She's waiting for adults to notice when she needs help. She's not yet telling people what she wants them to do. When she doesn't like something, she'll push it away or turn her body. And she gets dysregulated by loud spaces, but she's not yet able to reliably communicate or advocate for her sensory needs. All right, so knowing what we know about Charlie, let's take a look at this communication skill bank. So what you see on the screen now is a skill bank of tons of different communication functions. I have cleared them all out just to keep us focused on the ones that we're working on today. But this is a bank of, I think, 16 or so different communication function areas. And then they're all broken down into 10-ish different skills that might fall under that. And some of them overlap, but I find this table to be the holy grail that I have had printed out and on my wall, literally, even back when I worked in the school and I was staring at a cinder block wall all day, I had this table just taped to my wall. So, because I find it so easy to just be able to quickly think, okay, if we're going to work on requesting, well, what kind of requesting am I going to support this child with? So, if you're looking at this skill bank and you're like, I want this, this is also inside the membership. Now, let's go into the About Charlie really quickly again. I'm just going to leave this up here for just a second because what we're going to do now is we're going to go through that skill bank and choose the exact skills to add to Charlie's rubric. Okay, so from the ones, and hopefully you can see it, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I hope that helped. From the ones that you can see on the screen, that might be a little too big. So, okay. Which of these skills do you think we might add to Charlie's rubric? I'm going to come back into the chat and see if anybody chooses the ones that I think. Let's see. Anybody have an idea? And any questions that you have about, like I see Tracy, I see your question about membership and All Access Pass. I'll talk about that for a few minutes at the end of our call, just to make sure everybody understands. Okay, I see people talking about requesting a preferred item, asking for help. Okay, oops. So here's what I would choose. I agree. The first thing I would choose for Charlie is I would choose will request a preferred item or activity. Now, the reason that I would choose this, even though she's kind of doing this a little bit, right? She's doing this when she can see that item in the environment. I want her doing that even when she can't see it, right? We shouldn't only be able to ask for things that we can see. And so a lot of times when I write a rubric, I'm not looking for skills that the child has not yet demonstrated. A lot of times what I'm looking for are the skills that they're doing sometimes that I can build on. And I find that to be a great way to actually gain momentum because they're already doing it in some capacity. So requesting a preferred item or activity is going to be on the list for Charlie. The next thing that I would have on my rubric for this child would be to ask for help. This is so important. It's one of the first things that I start with my autistic kids because they need to be able to reliably ask for help when they need it. This affects so many different areas of their day. So being able to ask for help is huge. So I would specifically have that on Charlie's rubric. Now I would move on to protesting, and I would choose from this list that Charlie will protest undesired items or activities. We know right now that Charlie is doing this with her body, and that's valid, right? One of the things I say constantly is that multimodal communication is valid, and using your body language and your actions to communicate is valid. It's not any less valid than saying stop. But sometimes we also need to think about how well it's being understood, because if you're communicating but the people around you are not understanding, that is extremely frustrating. And so it's not that we're trying to replace Charlie's actions of pushing things away. It's just that we're offering her an alternative, a different way, so that way she has a reliable way to communicate and protest across the board. We want her peers to be able to respect her personal space. And so we're going to not replace how she's doing this, but add to it. We're always looking to augment skills. Now, if I think about self-advocacy, this is an area that I think is really important for Charlie as well. And what I would choose here, although there are many different options that I think could fit here, but just for the sake of time, I would choose that Charlie will advocate for a sensory need or discomfort. Right now, when I think of Charlie, and even though Charlie's not a real child, I try to base her off of the kids that I've worked with over the years. And when Charlie gets dysregulated, for example, in the loud gym, she might just take off. She might just leave the room. And we want her to be safe, right? So being able to say, it's too loud. I need my headphones. Can we leave? These things are safety for Charlie. So I would probably start with her ability to advocate for her sensory needs. And then if I go down to directing actions, which is always one of my favorite things to work on because it's fun to be able to let kids tell us what to do. I would have Charlie be able to tell us when she wants us to do something. So let's find it on this list. I think I would choose to start or continue something because we know that she's showing that she likes bubbles, but she's not yet saying blow the bubbles or do that again. So again, a lot of these skills could be on the rubric. What we're doing when we write our rubric is we're choosing the ones that are most important and the biggest priorities for that child at the time of writing the rubric. Okay, so now we've chosen 5 different skills. What I do next is I go into my template, and this is what my rubric looks like pretty much on every child's report. It's a table with the skills in the first column and then the scores of 1 through 4 and a final column with the total that they achieved on that particular data collection. So what I'll do is I will write in all of those skills. Let me see if I wrote it in here yet. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll take those skills that we chose and I will put them in under the skills column. So she'll request a preferred object, help, protest undesired items, advocate for a sensory need. And then, like I said, I might even get specific and put what that might look like for the child right in the skill. And she'll direct actions to start or continue. So if we go back and think about what happens after we write the goal and we choose our skill areas, we have to define what those ratings mean. So when I think about rating scales for skills, let me go back to this. I like to measure them by level of support needed. So a score of 1, let me write this. This is a score of 1 is going to mean that the child needed maximum support. A score of 2 will mean that they needed moderate support. A score of 3, minimal. And a score of 4 would be independent. Am I the only one who can never spell independent? Okay. Now, this is not good enough on its own, though. So what I like to do is I like to be very specific when I'm talking about what those scores mean and say, what does maximum support look like for this child? And even these could probably be clearer. But one of the things that came up recently with a member inside the collective was when she was presenting her rubric to the team, they said, well, what's the difference between maximum support and moderate and minimum? And I said, this is a really important thing to be clear about because we want everybody collecting data for our rubrics. We want everybody on the team to know exactly what we are measuring and how we are scoring things. And that only will be possible if we're extremely clear about what each level of support means and what it looks like. So her and I just added some descriptions to each of those levels, and it became so much more clear to everybody on the team. If I give a score of 1, that might mean that I'm offering direct modeling. For another child, it might mean that I'm just providing the model and they might not imitate it yet. We can be very clear and specific on rubrics, which is why I love them so much. So this is what I would say the scores would mean for this particular rubric. Now, if I think about Charlie and her baseline, because she's not a real child, I'm just going to go ahead and walk you through my thought process if this was a real child. So I would think, okay, requesting a preferred object. I think I'd probably end up saying that Charlie does this sometimes because she does do it occasionally if the thing is in front of her and she really wants it. But she doesn't always need me to do a direct model. So I'd probably give her a 2 for that because she does need moderate support. She needs to have the visuals. And again, this is going to be really up for interpretation based on what your scores mean. And as long as you are clear in your documentation and you explain what each of these mean, then your scores might look different. And that's okay. It's individualized, which is what it should be, right? Now, requesting help, she's not yet doing that. So I would give her a 1. She would need full support in order to do that. For protesting, she's starting to do that on her own. And though she does it occasionally, she's not doing it consistently. And she does need support when there's a communication breakdown. Like if a child comes over and tries to play with her and she doesn't want them to, she's not always understood. She does need support in those moments. So I would probably give her a 2 for that. For advocating for her sensory needs, right now we know she's really not doing this and she's becoming dysregulated and frustrated. So I would give her a 1 for that. And directing actions, I would also probably end up giving her a 1 because in our description of Charlie, she really wasn't doing this yet. So Charlie's baseline would be to add all these numbers up and we would get a 7 out of a possible 20. And so her baseline, you would write the date and then you would write the score, 7 out of 20. This becomes your starting point for your rubric goal. And then depending on where you want to see Charlie by the next time that you are going to be taking, getting a new baseline, maybe that's the full IEP year, whatever that looks like in your setting, you can then decide what you want your goal to be. Is it 16 out of 20? I typically look at it like I want Charlie to move up at least 1 level on every score from her baseline. And so this score doesn't have to be set in stone, but you'll just play around with that for each child and figure out where you believe they'll be able to attain with the right support. Now, one other thing that I like to say here is that when it comes to writing your goals in, let's say, an IEP, or probably in other settings as well, you'll need your long-term goal, but then you'll also need your objectives or your short-term goals. That's easy with rubrics because each of these skills is a different short-term objective. So, for example, your short-term objective might be the same thing from up here, but it might say, we'll request a preferred object to achieve a 3 out of 4 on her communication rubric because I want her to increase by a point. So each of these becomes an objective, which makes it so easy to track and so easy to put into your documentation. A few other questions that tend to come up when I do this demo is, where do I put this rubric? I have software that wouldn't really allow for this. And that's going to be different for everybody. But what I will say is that everywhere I've worked over the years, I've been able to attach this to the IEP, if not on the software, then just as an attachment somewhere at the end of the report or somewhere like that. And I will just write in my goal area, see attached or something like that. So make sure you know how to put this into your particular settings required documentation. But this kind of goal has worked for me across the board. It's worked in schools, it's worked in private practice, it's worked for insurance reimbursement, it's worked for early intervention. It's genuinely been the only way I've written goals for 9 years at this point because it works and it can be individualized so deeply. Now, that's it. We literally just changed that goal and it took us a few minutes. It took us almost no time at all, right? So I want to come back to you for a second here. I'm going to remove this and come back up on the screen. And what I want to ask you now is, how are you feeling knowing that we just took that 80% accuracy goal, right? We took that goal that we all have written or seen, and we changed it to something that's actually meaningful and measurable. How are you feeling about that? Do you feel like this could work for you? Do you feel that this is something that could make goal writing easier for you, that could make data collection easier? I'm seeing a lot of I love it in the chat, makes more sense. Yeah, I see a lot of people who are excited to get started with this. And this is genuinely exactly how I felt the first time I heard about rubrics. I thought, I'm so sorry. Why did nobody teach me this? This would have saved me. I'm not even kidding, tears. This would have saved me a lot of tears sitting at my desk and being frustrated. So I'm glad to know that this is something that feels useful for those of you who are here kind of learning this, because the truth of the matter, the bottom line, is that despite what your experience might tell you, goal writing should not be taking us hours. It just shouldn't. It shouldn't be something that we are thinking about at night. It shouldn't be something we're staying late to do. It should not be this hard. But if you're like me, it probably does sometimes, right? You sit down to write your goal and suddenly you're just second guessing everything, trying to make it measurable and meaningful and actually reflect how you are supporting your autistic students. Now, I want to just speak directly to those of you who are here with me, whether you're live or watching the replay. If you took time out of your busy day to be here, I bet you're probably spending a lot of time writing goals. You might be taking them home, working on them in your personal time. You might be scouring the internet trying to find goals. And so if that's you, I just want you to know that there is a better way. And if you're here, I bet you're probably trying to do things differently, even if your system is still doing things in a very outdated way or in a way that makes it difficult. And you're probably going to think about this framework after you leave. You're probably going to think, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And then you'll go and try to implement it, which is great. I want all of my presentations to be so actionable that you feel like you can take it and run with it. But I just want to also offer you another option for those of you who want ongoing support and who want to have the clear framework, the tools that could save you hours, and a community that gets it. I just want you to imagine what it would be like if you could just start doing this without the headache of trying to figure it out on your own. So if you had those clear frameworks and tools and a community that gets it, then you would be able to do this with ease. So that's exactly why I created my child-led collective. I've talked about it a little bit here and there on this presentation. I'll be talking about it all week as well. But the child-led collective is a membership for autistic support professionals like you who want to practice in a joyful, affirming, and child-led way. So I'm going to tell you for the next few minutes a little bit about what is in the collective so that you get an idea of it. I'm also going to invite you to join if this seems like your natural next step. But we'll also be talking about this at each of my presentations, and especially on Wednesday night, I'm going to take you a little bit more behind the scenes into the collective. But inside, you get a comprehensive resource library. We have tons of generator tools like the Rubric generator, where you can go in and answer a couple questions and it will generate your rubric in minutes. If you stay till the end, I'm also going to give you the link to try the rubric generator so you can see how fast it is and how easy and how accurate it can be. So stay till the end. We'll put that link in the chat. I want you to try it because I think you'll be blown away. We've got the Child-Led Coach, which is a tool trained on all of my frameworks, my podcasts, everything that I've created. And it's like having me in your back pocket without actually having me in your back pocket. But you can ask questions, you can create resources, you can get feedback. So we call that the Child-Led Coach, and it's one of members' favorite parts of the community. We also have coaching calls every month. We have co-working calls every week. We have a private podcast, which is one of my favorite parts, where members submit their questions and I answer them and deliver it right to their phones in a private podcast. And of course, the community, which is worth its weight in gold, where we've got professionals who share your values, who want to do this work the way that you do. And we've got the group chat, which is my favorite way to connect with members. We are in a Voxer chat where we can send voice notes and texts, and it's just such a great way to stay connected and ask questions and get thoughts from other people who are going through this with you. There are over 250 professionals already inside the membership, and there are mostly speech therapists, but we've also got educators. We've got a couple OTs. We've got a few music therapists, at least one music therapist. So while this membership was designed for speech therapists, it is really for anybody supporting autistic kids in any capacity who wants to be child-led. So here's what you get the moment you're inside the collective. You get a clear path, not a pile of content. I'm not going to go, here's 12 hours of things you need to do. I give you a clear path from unlearning all the way through leading with confidence. We've got all of those tools, those generators that I described that do the heavy lifting. So we got the rubric generator. We have a session note generator, a plan generator, a report generator, a family resource generator. Like if you're working with a family or a team member and you want to explain a concept, come to our resource generator and say, this is what I'm trying to create, and it will generate that for you based on everything from inside the collective. Our resource library is continuously being updated, and we've got a resource for every hard moment that you might encounter, which I am really proud of. It is everything that I've created is inside the membership. And you have the right people in your corner when you need them. And this, to me, is the best part because our members are incredible and they're so generous with their time and their experiences, and they're always there for each other. And I just love seeing all of those friendships and relationships grow inside the collective. You also earn PDH certificates as you go through the content. So for every training, every minute you spend learning inside the hub, the Child-Led Collective Hub, you are able to earn certificates of completion. So as a recap, when you join the collective, you'll get an entire year inside where you will receive the full success path, the whole aligned rubric framework and goal writing suite with done for you templates and the generator. You get the child-led coach and all of those other tools. We have our monthly hardest case roundtable where you submit your hardest thing that's happening in your current situation in your career, whether that is a particular child you want support with, a tricky situation you're navigating. You submit that and we talk about it together, plus the private podcast. You get a brand new resource every month, and you get PDH certificates for everything that you do inside. Now, the Child-Led Collective is normally $408 for the year, $34 a month. But because you're at the summit, we are offering it for a reduced price for the entire year for $297. And so this will get you a full year inside the collective with all of the things that I just shared. And when you sign up before Wednesday night at midnight, you'll also get invited to an exclusive VIP coaching call with me at the end of September, where we'll have a small group of people and you'll submit your questions and I will do live coaching with you on that VIP call. So when you join before Thursday evening, you'll also be added to that exclusive VIP call, which I'm really looking forward to. So you'll get the entire year plus that call for $297. And because I know that it can be nerve-wracking to spend money to try things like this, there is a 7-day money-back guarantee. So you're fully protected. Come into the membership, join a call, download a resource. If you get in and you're like, this isn't for me, let us know within 7 days and you'll get your money back. No questions asked, because I want this to feel like a decision that's aligned with what you need and a decision that doesn't add more to your plate, but that actually starts taking some of that stress off of your plate. So if you're interested in joining the collective, you can go and learn more about it. Everything that you need to know will be here at childled.org/join. And you can go ahead and join. And like I said, when you join before Thursday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time, you'll also be invited to that VIP call that is exclusive for those of you who take action. Now, I'm going to leave this link up on the screen. And I'm going to come back into the chat and see what questions I can answer. So if you have questions about the membership, this is a great time to ask them. If you have questions about the rubric framework, if you have questions about anything that we went over, you can put them in the chat. And at this point, I'm also going to put the rubric generator, which is a mouthful. I'm going to put that link in the chat as well. All right, let me come back into the chat now. Okay, here is that link. So as you click the link for the rubric, you'll be able to generate your first rubric with that tool. And it's going to be it blew my mind, and I created the tool, but it's so useful. Members say they use it all the time. But when you are using it now, you'll be able to use it one time. But when you're in the membership, you get unlimited access to it. So anytime you go to um, write a goal, you can use the generator. You can use whatever you need. All right, I'm going to come in and see if there are any questions that I can answer here. Thank you all so much for being here. Okay, so Heather said, I love this, but how do we change all of the IEP goals that we've already written? And I see that Allie, who is a member from the collective, she answered this. And I was hoping, Allie, that you were here, because I remember having this conversation inside the collective where we're like, okay, well, now what do we do? Like, now what? And so, like Allie said, she just tried to kind of take it one at a time. Allie, I think that's what we had eventually come up with, where it's like, we can't go back and change every goal. That's not sustainable for us. But as their IEPs would come up, we would start to change it. And I think starting to think about progress in this way and keep your data in this way could be really beneficial, even if the goal isn't set up as a rubric. So if you have a goal that's 80% accuracy, wants and needs, like we talked about, you can create a data sheet for yourself that really gets more specifics. That way, when you're taking data, you actually know what your data is referencing. Because I know for me, there were times where I thought, oh, I'm such a great speech therapist keeping all this data. And then I'd get back to my desk and I would just have a piece of paper with like 500 pluses and a couple of minuses. I'm like, I have literally no idea what this means. So if you have the goals that you can't really amend right now, you can always create some form of data collection sheet. We have a bunch in the membership, but you could create something for yourself that helps you to start thinking of your students' goals in this way, even if you can't change them yet. Let me see if there are any other. Danielle said, I was a member but had to take a break for budget reasons. I hope to get back because it's an amazing resource. Danielle, we would love to have you back. We would love to. Let me see if there's anything else. Keisha said, I love the rubric, but I'm concerned about another therapist understanding and using it when covering for me. Now, this is something that came up with a member and something that we talked through inside the collective. But Keisha, one of the best ways to feel more confident about this is to, when you're writing your descriptions for the different scores of the rubric, be so abundantly clear about what each score looks like. And so you might say a score of 1 means maximum support. You might even write a sentence or two. Sometimes I'll write a sentence or two that says, this typically looks like Charlie doing X, Y, and Z thing. And I would give a score of 1 if I saw X, Y, or Z from Charlie. Inside the full aligned rubric framework, we have a lot more information about not only just identifying and describing the criteria that you choose and how to make it as clear as possible. But there's also a section in there about how to support your team in understanding rubrics. There is a section of the framework that talks about data collection as well and how to make that easier for yourself and for your team. I know that one of the best things that I did with rubrics was to sit down with my teams, explain the rubric, and then leave a binder with every student's rubrics in the binder. And I would encourage the team to go over and when they saw something from the child, go over and fill out a rubric. The best part about measuring it monthly was that I could then go back in at the end of the month and I could look at any data that was written down by a one-to-one, by a para, by a teacher. And I could use that when I was writing down their like official score for that month. And so I found that rubrics became the best way to collect data as a team because they were so much easier to just take a quick note here and there when you saw something. And so I found that my teams took more data when the goals are written this way. So hopefully some of that, Keisha, will help you in thinking about this because it is a really important thing. It's one of those things that I think was drilled into all of our minds when we became professionals. Like anybody should be able to pick this up and know exactly what you're working on. And I believe wholeheartedly that rubrics actually make that possible for us. Wendy says, do the presentations this week have captions? Wendy, we're going to have to look into that for you. They should, but that's definitely important to us. So Christy and I are going to see if there's a setting we can add to StreamYard if it's not there. But I definitely want to make sure that captions are there. So I just wanted to let you know, Wendy, we see your comment and we will work on that. All right, let me see what else. Okay, Nicole asked about insurance reimbursement. I'm not going to get all the way into this, but I will tell you that we have a little like addendum resource inside the collective that's specific to how to write these for insurance reimbursement, because this was a conversation that came up as well. And so there is a tool inside the membership that talks about how to be specific enough and write the things that insurance is looking for while still using this affirming goal writing process. I will say that it's never been denied for us, though my practice is mostly private pay at this point. We have submitted these rubric goals for insurance-based clients without issue, but every insurance is going to be different. But that tool inside the collective could be really useful if you are a member or thinking about joining. Katie asked, can you walk through the therapy note that you would write for a goal like this? Yeah, I can actually. Let me just pull this up for you because I want you to see one of the other tools that is inside the collective. I'm going to actually take you inside the collective if that's okay. And I know that some of you probably need to go. The link for the generator is in the chat. I want to respect your time, but for those of you who are curious and want to see, I'm going to share my screen and walk you through what that looks like. And Christy will put that join link in the chat just for anybody who didn't get a chance to grab it from the screen. Okay, let me look at this. Okay, let me make sure it's up. Okay, so this is what the collective looks like. Looks very similar to your Summit Hub. We try to keep things simple. This is that success path that we talked about, where each stage, no matter where you are in this journey, whether you're brand new or you're feeling already really confident, you'll be able to identify which stage you're in. You can move through them all, or you can find the one that's most important to you. But within each stage, you will see a little about that stage, a checklist, your PDH tracker, all of your trainings in one place for that particular stage, and then the downloads that are relevant to that stage. I'm going to find that note for you. Let me see. Another thing that we have inside is our resource library. This is where you come in and you can find whatever tools you're looking for. So I'm going to go into the library and go into notes and report writing. So one thing that we have inside the hub is a session note generator that is trained on our rubric system. So you can put your rough rubric data in and any other pertinent information that you want to include in your note, and you can click generate and it will write your note for you. But we also have the done for you. Let me just pull this up too. Let me make sure you're seeing the right screen now. Okay, so one of the tools inside the collective is this done for you rubric tool. Basically, we have written 4 rubrics in their entirety. So 4 of the rubrics that are most common, at least the ones that I've written over the years. And for each of those rubrics, you get the long-term goal already written for you. You get the objectives written out. You get the rubric, and these are editable. So you could go in and say, oh, I want to change what the scores mean, but you get a starting point for the rubric. You get a data collection sheet that you can edit. Then you get a session note template. This is how our session notes typically look in the clinic. We do a SOAP note. We have this objective section, which is a template you can use with this particular tool. Then we write down our scores. We fill in anything in brackets. And then I give you some options for what you might include in your note. So depending on your scores and your skills in that session. So a little template for your session note in here. We also have for each of these goals a progress monitoring form. So this is how I might represent my progress in a progress report, depending on what kind of report I'm writing. But I would put my rubric scores for that marking period, however long it is. And then I've got in here a template for you to use for writing your progress monitoring. And then we also have a template or an example of what present levels in an IEP might look like for each of these rubrics. So you get that for all 4 of these: initiating, commenting, protesting, rejecting, requesting, and directing actions. I love this done for you tool, not because you're going to use it for every child, but because it shows you the entire system in like completion. Like it shows you how everything fits together for a child's documentation. So this is a tool that is inside the collective as well. And like I said, the session note generator, I will show you quickly before we wrap up, because I think this is one of our newer tools, and I'm really, really excited about it. Let's go into it, and I'm going to share that with you. This will be the last thing I show from inside the membership, and we'll answer any other quick questions before we go, but we've got more live calls coming today, so make sure you put those on your calendar. Okay, so this is our session note toolkit. So you'd put the child's initials in, the date, you'd answer a couple questions about what functions you worked on, how the child was at the session, what modalities they used, what you focused on, anything that you want to include, any like specific play routines, activities, moments, anything that you want to include in that, any caregiver or teacher updates, and then you just press generate and it will give you the full session note. It also has progress monitoring, so you can save for each child, you can save their sessions. Let's see if I can pull this up. It shows you right here their score. So then it will start to map their scores toward their goal. So you'll be able to see almost like a graph of how they're doing. It'll graph which functions they're using. It'll graph what modalities they're using. And it also helps you to include this in their present levels. So this toolkit helps you to document session notes, progress monitoring, and present levels. I always tell members that these tools are not HIPAA compliant. So you never put a child's name, anything identifying. It will not ask you for anything identifying. I always put either the first initial or even a number if I want to just assign a number for kids on my caseload, but you never want to put anything personal into any tool online, really, is my rule. But I wanted you to see that this is how easy your documentation can be inside the hub, inside the collective, and we're constantly adding new tools. So, all right, at this point, I am going to come back to you. And I'm going to remind you one more time where you can go to learn more about the Child Led Collective. So you can go to childled.org/join, and you can learn everything that I shared about the collective will be there. We'll be talking about this all week. This is really the best way to keep the momentum going that you'll feel all throughout the summit. And so if you are curious, go and check that link, childled.org/join. And yes, I see somebody asked if they'll get a PD certificate. We will be giving PD certificates for the live calls. So I will put those into your hub, and that will be for free ticket holders and all access pass holders for the live calls. When you're on the free ticket, you won't get a PD certificate for the pre-recorded presentations, but for these live calls, everybody will get the PD certificate. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? I see everybody saying thank you. I am so thankful for all of you for being here. Thank you for being here with me at my first live call of this year's summit. So much fun. We've got so much more in store for you, and I can't wait to continue to spend time with you. I know last year, the summit was this big buzz for me. And I don't know about you guys, probably not. But for me, I told Christy I couldn't sleep last night or the night before. This is like my Super Bowl. And so last year, just if you were here last year, you probably remember my little talks at the end of my conversations. But last year, I was so sad when it all ended. I'm like, where'd all my friends go? So if you were here last year, you probably remember that same buzz and then big drop after the summit. So the collective is really the best way to keep the vibes going. Thank you, Shelly. Shelly said you're winning your Super Bowl. Oh, thank you. Samantha said you did amazing. You know what, guys? Thank you. I navigated sharing my screens, which is always an issue for me. But thank you. Thank you for all of your kind words, for being here. But like I said, if you want the momentum to keep going and you join the collective, you get an entire year of this. And I'm telling you, we have just as much fun inside. So yes, I see Amity said you were sad too at the end of last year. Yeah, it's so hard. Laura says your notes to go along with the training are amazing. Yes, I am telling you, as an ADHDer, I don't know about any of you, if any of you are ADHD, have ADHD, or are neurodivergent, I cannot take notes during the presentation to save my life. Like, I will look back on my notes and think, what? What does that mean? It'll be like a little picture that I drew. They don't make sense. So whenever I give a presentation here at the summit, in the collective, I make a fully comprehensive summary and action plan, because I want you to walk away with everything you need to be able to put it into practice. If you are in the, oh, Sarah, that's a great question. Hi, Karen. I see Karen. Karen, there was a handout and notes. Send us an email, Karen, if you don't have that, or if anybody else has that link handy. I think Christy has left. So if anybody has that link in the chat and wants to put that in again, I can look at it as well in a second, Karen. But there is a handout/workbook that goes along with this presentation. Sarah has a great question. Can I incorporate this into an EHR like Simple Practice? Yes. We don't use Simple Practice. We use Jane at my clinic. And we have just basically made it so that our rubrics are like they show up each session. Thank you, Lara. Lara put the link in the chat. And Maureen put the rubric generator for anybody who wants to try that tool. But yes, the answer to your question, Sarah, is that yes, you should be able to incorporate it into your EHR system. We have it in Jane, and it just populates each session for our clinicians. We also have and I don't know how Simple Practice does it, but in Jane, we have different tools. Like there are little check boxes and things that it can use to document, to show the difference in progress. So I won't bore you with all the Jane details, but yes, the short answer is yes. Sharon says, is there a limit to the number of students you can do in the collective? Nope. You can use any of the tools in the collective anytime you want. Those are there for you. And they are the tools that I think back to the SLP me that struggled through all of this for many, many years. These are the tools that would have changed things for me, would have allowed me to leave work at work. And that's why I create the tools that I create inside the collective. If there are any members still here, which I'm not sure if there are because they've seen this, but if they are here, then thank you. You are truly dedicated. And you want to share any of your thoughts about the collective inside the chat, that would be great. But if anybody wants to hear feedback, you can also ask in the Facebook group. There are many members inside. And you can also read some of their testimonials on the sales page for the collective, childled.org/join. Okay, friends. Well, I have something exciting coming up in about 20 minutes. I am going to be interviewing Kayshana Fleming. Kayshana is a multimodal communicator. Sometimes they use AAC. They sometimes communicate with speech. And I am going to be interviewing them and uploading that interview for your day 3. Nothing like waiting till the last minute. But last year, my conversation with Kayshana was transformative, to say the least. I learned so much. And so don't miss that one. It is coming on day 3, but we're going to do that interview today and put it in your hub for day 3. Now, if you want to join our next live call, if you're an All Access Pass holder, then you have networking at 12 p.m. Eastern time. This is really just a laid back, unstructured call where you'll be able to just meet each other, connect to each other. And if, okay, hold on. I see one thing in here. The Google Doc says access denied. You need to make a copy, Taylor. If you can't get it, you can always send us an email to summit@childled.org. And so at 4 p.m., we have our live call with Jessica Frew, who is an AAC user. She's an eye gaze AAC user. And I had a conversation with her a few weeks ago in preparation for the summit. And it was great. She's the coolest person. And a lot of what she'll share at that call will be about how to actually be better communication partners for our AAC users. And then if you missed the good news, at 7 p.m., we have Mateo Moreno. Mateo is an AAC user. We had originally said that this call would be for All Access Pass holders only, but we decided, and this was something that was on my heart to do, and I had forgotten to make this call. So last night on the live kickoff call, I made this game time decision and I said, everybody, regardless of whether you can upgrade to the All Access Pass or not, everybody should be able to see an AAC user presentation. That's just an aligned decision that I made. So whether you have a free ticket or an All Access Pass, you are invited to join us for Mateo's call at 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight. I'm seeing quite a few people saying that the Google Doc is not working. I know it worked for others. Oh, you know what? I know why it's not working. Hold on one second. You know why? Because you have to do a copy. Let me put it in the chat for you. That's, here we go. Yeah. Okay. So Chrissy got it. Chrissy put it in there. It has to be a copy. Yeah. So the one that Chrissy or I put in, both of those should work. So let me know. Okay, I see Amity says I haven't been able to sign up for that one. We did update it this morning, so double check in your hub. If for some reason you still can't, send us an email. Anytime you need anything from us, the best way to reach us is at summit@childled.org. But I'm going to go in right after this call, and I am going to make sure that that link is for everybody, available for everybody, I should say. All right, friends. Well, thank you for being here. I hope to see you at the next live call. Get some rest. Chrissy said, are there set times for giveaways or groups in Facebook? There are not. Typically, we do a giveaway at this call. So you know what? Since some of you are still here, and I appreciate that, let me know if you're on a free ticket and you want an all access pass. Just put me in the chat. I'm gonna pick a couple people. I'm gonna pick 2 people to upgrade to the all access pass. So if you're on the free ticket, but you want an upgraded all access pass, just put me in the chat. I'm going to give the chat about 30 seconds to catch up. And then I'm going to pick 2 people to upgrade. I also saw, while you guys are doing this, I saw somebody asking here if school districts ever join the collective. We would love that. We would love to have a whole team. I think that's the best way to do it. And we do accept POs, purchase orders. Yeah. I always want to say PO orders, but we do accept purchase orders. So if you're interested in having a team join the collective, just reach out to us and we can give you all that information. And there is group discounts as well. Okay, I'm going to do the hardest thing, which is pick 2 of you to upgrade. I'm just going to scroll through the chat and land on 2 people. And I'm not going to look. I'm not going to cheat. I'm just going to stop. Okay, I landed on Yolanda Strong. Okay, so Yolanda, we are going to upgrade you to the All Access Pass. And I am going to write your name down because Christy's not here. And this is the kind of thing that my ADHD brain does. I love to give things away. Okay, so we're going to reach out to you, Yolanda, to help you get your upgraded pass. And we've got 1 more to give away, so I'm just going to close my eyes and stop. Okay, and we have Jessie Ramdani. I hope I'm not saying that wrong. If I am, I would love for you to correct me in the chat. So Jessie, congratulations. You will also receive an all access pass. I said it right. Listen, sometimes being a speech therapist has its perks. Okay, so we've got Jessie and Yolanda. So I will see you all today. And we will do giveaways on every call. And then throughout the summit, we'll do giveaways on the Facebook as well. We've got all kinds of bingo prizes too. So make sure you're playing bingo. Thank you all for being here. And I can't wait to talk to you soon. Bye, guys.